Welcome to this week's Darry Fanfic Book Club. Grab a seat, don't dilly-dally. Right, so we will begin with our cult club pledge as usual. All together now. We are the deluded, the Darry enthusiasts. While you might think this ship is weird and transmuted, we refute this. We just think our darling Draco and the boy who lived are well suited. Every Darry fanfic ever written, we aim to review it. So welcome to the Darry Fan Club. Yes, you've been recruited. Hi, my name is Cheetah, and my aim is to read every Darry fanfic ever written. Although I'm reconsidering that after this episode. But no spoilers, no spoilers. Just one message from future me. The name of this fanfic is actually pronounced Scholomance, but I've been saying Scholomance for this entire thing. It's my first time, be gentle with me. However, as I've since found out, the Scholomance is a school of black magic run by the devil and has its origins in Romanian folktale. That's it, that's all from me. On to the video. Today's fanfiction is called Scholomance, and it's the first ever Darry fanfic on AO3. I'll leave the navigation settings in the description. There aren't any major tags for me to let you know about, but even though it's not tagged, bear in mind that this fanfic does include major character deaths. As in, it's ridiculous. They're killing everybody in this one. They're all dropping like flies. This fanfic was uploaded on a chapter by chapter basis. If you know how to download all the chapters as one ebook, please let me know. And after I've gone over the summary of the fanfic, we're going to grade it based on the OWLS, OWLS grading system. So that's all of the intro taken care of. Let's go. So chapter 1 opens up with Neville. He's confronted by Malfoy and his gangs on the way to Divinity, and Malfoy of course messes with Neville, and now Neville's running late. So eventually when he gets to Divinity, Trelawney of course she has words for him, because she's saying, well, I let you know every time that you're gonna be late, so I wish you would put some effort into not being late. But in Neville's head, he's thinking, well, you predict so much gloom and doom for me that I can never keep track of when you say that I'm gonna be late, because it's so often. But something of note is that Neville isn't feeling well, and he hasn't been feeling well for a while. So even in Divinity class, he can't really focus. His head hurts, he's slumping in his seat, he can't pay attention to the lesson, and Trelawney takes note of this, and she tells him that the fates have been giving her hints that all isn't well with Neville. So of course Neville is spooked, and he goes to Madame Pomfrey. Madame Pomfrey checks him over. She doesn't see anything wrong with him. And worse, when she finds out that it's Professor Trelawney who sent him, like she's telling him that there's nothing wrong with him and he needs to go to his next class. His next class is potions. So he missed lunch because he was at the nurse, and now he's also running late for potions. So he gets there in a fluster, and he still isn't feeling well, and class has already started, but he slips in, and Hermione's worried because he doesn't look too good, but he's trying to get himself together in order to complete Professor Snape's assignment. Spoiler alert, he messes it up, and he winds up back in the infirmary when his dragon fire potion backfires on him and doesn't work out right, and he doesn't leave the infirmary until it's late in the night. And on his way back to Gryffindor Tower, he runs into Malfoy and Malfoy's gang again. But Neville still isn't feeling well. He's swaying on his feet, he can't focus. Malfoy thinks he's faking it, but Neville isn't faking it. Like, he can feel that there's something wrong, like there's something bubbling up inside of him that's trying to burst forward, but he's trying to keep it down because he just knows that it's something horrible, but in the end he can't keep it down, and he says something to Malfoy and then passes out afterwards. He doesn't know what he says, but he wakes up in the infirmary again, and this time his grandma is there, and she lets him know that he's actually been out for 3 days, and he's so confused. He's like, what happened? Tell me what happened. And this is when he finds out that he's actually a seer, and it's dangerous for untrained seers to have visions just come on them like that out of nowhere, because they can pass out, they can fall, they can hit their head. And she's telling him that he's the real deal. He isn't like a Trelawney or anything like that. He's the real deal. And Dumbledore comes to visit him because Dumbledore has heard about what happened to him, and Dumbledore offers to teach him divinity himself. Fast forward, Neville gets out of the infirmary, and after a Quidditch match where Slytherin wins against Hufflepuff, he confronts Malfoy in the training room and asks Malfoy what his prediction was, because Neville can't remember what he told Malfoy, and Malfoy is agitated and threatening Neville and saying, get out of here. So fast forward again, and Neville is speaking with Hermione, and Hermione reassures Neville that it has to be something awful, because if it wasn't, like, Malfoy would be telling the entire school. So it has to be something awful. And Neville takes comfort in that. And in the next scene, we have the teachers. So we have Dumbledore, Professor McGonagall, Snape, all discussing the situation. And they're saying nothing really important, just that they can use him in the fight against Voldemort eventually. But they're all worried because they haven't had a true seer in however many thousand years. There's a mention of a talent that Hermione has that they just found out about, but it's never mentioned again anywhere in the fanfic, so I guess it's not important. But they were listing it as a reason why they're also worried, and they know that doom is impending. That's the end of that chapter. I forgot to mention that this fanfic can be read in one day. If it's a weekend and you don't really have much to do, this fanfic can be read in one day or half a day. It's not really much to it. So chapter 2 opens up with Harry and Malfoy in a forest somewhere. They're bloody and panicking and bickering. So it's never described to us, but apparently they had somehow gotten into some kind of altercation with Voldemort. Voldemort somehow had gotten a hold of them, and Voldemort was trying to sacrifice Malfoy. He was trying to do this right off Arsharti, I can't pronounce that, but he was trying to do some kind of blood sacrifice with Malfoy. But Sirius showed up out of nowhere and somehow disturbed it, and now they've wound up in this forest somewhere, and Malfoy is agitated. He's marked now, so even though the rite wasn't completed, he's now marked by Voldemort, so anywhere he goes, Voldemort will be able to find him. So he starts walking further into the forest towards the sound of waves, and Harry is following him, and he's asking him, what are you doing? What are you doing? And eventually it's revealed that Malfoy is trying to off himself, because it's either that or Voldemort finds him again and finishes the ritual, which will make him some kind of all-powerful. So Harry, of course, tries to talk Draco out of doing this because, of course, he's Harry. He has to be the hero, and he eventually reveals that even though he hates Malfoy, he doesn't want to see him do this. I mean, he wants to punch him in the face often, but it's not the same thing. He doesn't want to see him do this. And they start tussling. Harry starts trying to physically restrain Malfoy, and he winds up straddling Malfoy in order to keep him away from the cliff. And that's when like this exchange happens where Draco, of course, is saying if the roles were reversed, he'd be throwing Harry off the cliff, but Harry's saying, well, I don't hate you that much. But it's a serious situation, and we see a kind of soft side to Malfoy, or as soft as Malfoy can get, when he offers to not do it until Harry walks away. So he's offering to have Harry walk away, and he promises that he won't do it until he's gone, so that Harry doesn't have to see or hear anything. And of course, Harry is not okay with that. But eventually, Sirius finds them, and they ask Sirius if he killed Voldemort, and of course he didn't. But wherever they were fighting, Dumbledore showed up, and they were able to chase off Voldemort. The scene jumps forward, and Harry wakes up in a bed, a strange bed, next to Malfoy, who's asleep next to him. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to say, this is 5th year, because when Neville was in potions class, he did mention that they would be sitting the owls later on this year, so this is 5th year. So Harry wakes up in a strange bed next to Malfoy, and he opens the door, and he realizes that he's in Dumbledore's office. Dumbledore is sitting by the fire, and Harry goes out to talk to him, and he lets him know everything that happened. But he does it as a kind of kindness to Draco, because he doesn't want Draco to have to tell the story himself. So he tells Dumbledore, and we find out that it was Lucius who offered up Malfoy to Voldemort to be sacrificed. I don't know. We don't know how Harry got into the mix of it, but he was just there, and Lucius was just there, and he offered up Malfoy. I must also tell you that this is the most useless Harry Potter main character Harry Potter I've ever read in a fanfic. If Harry Potter wasn't in this book, it would have turned out to be the very same book, because he doesn't do anything. I mean, I just told you that Voldemort had Harry and Draco, and like he captured them and had them in the same room, and Voldemort decided to sacrifice Draco instead of kill Harry, because Harry's the one who can stop him, or is supposed to be anyway. But this Harry Potter is just there so that the fanfic can be called a Harry Potter fanfic, essentially. And I have to say, I've noticed a culture in the AO3 comment section. I'm not mad at it, but I haven't really seen any serious criticism of works, and I understand that, because these fanfic writers aren't really professionals. There are some fantastic fanfics out there, but they aren't professionals. They're just regular readers who had a great idea and decided to write a fanfic about it, and we are all grateful because now we have more things to read. So I think that's why people don't really come hard with the criticisms. But sometimes I kind of feel like I am losing my mind, because I'll read a fanfic like this and I'm thinking to myself, what is this? And then I check the comments section and it's all, oh my god, this is the greatest thing I've ever read. And I don't know if the writers are deleting the negative comments or people just aren't leaving them, because I myself don't leave negative comments on AO3 fanfics, because I'm just so grateful that the writer wrote something and decided to share it, and you never know if it took a lot of courage to do this, so you don't really want to rain on anybody's parade. So I myself don't leave negative comments, so I can understand why other people wouldn't, but sometimes I just read the comments and I'm thinking, is it me? But I know it's not me. Anyway, so Harry is in Dumbledore's office and they're talking, and he tells Dumbledore Draco was actually gonna off himself. And while they were on the cliff, Draco had told Harry what the prophecy that Neville saw was. So Harry relays that to Dumbledore, and the prophecy is essentially said something like, when the one you love opens the door to death, then the only other choice will be the door that despair opens. So when Harry tells Dumbledore this, Dumbledore gets all stricken, like, what? Oh my god, no, 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 not that. And Dumbledore makes Harry swear not to tell anybody about this. And Malfoy was listening at the door, so he comes out and he confronts them. He wants to know what the prophecy means, but Dumbledore won't tell him. And it becomes clear that Dumbledore also doesn't want him to leave his office, even though they're at Hogwarts and they're supposed to be safe. He wants to keep Malfoy as safe as possible, so he wants to keep him locked in his personal rooms. So eventually Dumbledore leaves, and he leaves Harry and Malfoy alone. And Malfoy gets Harry to promise that he'll find out what the door to despair means, because that's what made Dumbledore freak out. And he wants to know because he doesn't want to spend the rest of his life locked in Dumbledore's office or being chased by Voldemort. And Harry's like, how am I supposed to find out what this is about? And Draco says, use Hermione. Like, she's bound to know how to find out what this is, because of course Harry is useless himself. So Draco gives Harry a deadline to find out what the hell this door to despair thing means. So Harry rounds up Ron and Hermione, and Hermione has access to the restricted section, and they're trying to find books on what this could mean. And they're so confused as to why Harry is trying to help Draco, and Harry finally admits to them that if he doesn't, Draco is gonna off himself. So they finally start taking it seriously, and they try to help. Hermione eventually finds out what the door that despair opens mean, and it turns out that it's a black school run by demons. Anyone can get in, but to get out you have to defeat all of the doorkeepers. 10 of them are demons, and the 11th one is invincible. And no one has ever come out of the Scholomance in more than 800 years. So Harry goes to Malfoy and explains all of this to him, and Malfoy is like, of course that's what it means. And Malfoy goes to Dumbledore's desk and he takes out this knife that he uses to slit his palm. Harry can see that something's happening, but he doesn't really understand what, because he's asking him, what are you doing? What are you doing? And Malfoy goes to the bathroom door and wipes the blood on the door hinge, and he tells Harry that he's going to go to the Scholomance. And Harry's saying, seriously, what's the difference between being locked up here and being locked up there? And Draco is saying, well, at least if he goes there, he has a chance of getting out eventually. Here in Dumbledore's office, they just plan to keep him locked up forever. So he's gonna go to the Scholomance. And Harry's saying, is it really that serious? Do you really have nothing else to live for? And Draco looks at him and says, well, maybe if things were different. And from that you can infer that he means between him and Harry. If things were different between them, then sure. But he opens the door, the bathroom door, and it's pitch black, and a voice says to him, enter if you dare. That's when the office door bursts open and Dumbledore comes running in like, no. But Malfoy's too fast, so he slips into the door and Harry just misses him by a hair. When Harry opens the door again, it's just a regular bathroom. And that's the end of chapter 2. Now let me tell you, chapter 3. Chapter 3, I cannot believe was written by the same writer. Chapter 3 was so masterfully done. It was written as a kind of montage of Draco's time in the Scholomance, but it was just so good. So he goes in and he starts, with hopelessness and despair like everybody else, but eventually he comes around and he starts to take it seriously, and he starts to learn, and he starts to grow, and he starts to ask questions, and eventually he beats all of the demons, and the 11th one he faces off with, and he beats that one too. And I know it doesn't sound so engaging, me just talking about it, but it's the writing that I liked. So chapter 3, that one's definitely worth a read. Oh, and he's in there for like 5 years. It takes him 5 years to learn everything that he needs to learn. And something else of note is that this fanfic was actually started in the 2000s, but it didn't finish until 2007, and it's only 6 chapters. I think the last 2 chapters were done in 2007, so anybody who was following this story had to wait a while, but it's completed now. So chapter 4 opens with an argument between Ginny and Harry, and Ginny is telling Harry that she's never felt special to Harry, and Harry has always treated her like a chore, and Harry hasn't been a good boyfriend, and Harry is obviously seeing reason with the stuff that she's saying, because he's never really felt all that into it, because I guess Malfoy left, and now he's only half of a person, but he didn't know that he was treating her so badly, so he feels horrible also. And eventually they split. He and Ginny split, and he feels awful about it. So fast forward, and Harry gets a visit from Neville. Neville has come over to deliver a vase. It's Neville's wedding present to Hermione and Ron, because they're gonna get married in a couple days. So Harry's asking him why he's not coming to the wedding and why he doesn't just deliver it himself. And that's when we find out that Neville has always had a crush on Hermione, and he just can't bring himself to see her get married. So he's delivered his wedding gift to them, to Harry, and Harry should take it to the wedding. So we jump forward again, and it's at the wedding. Harry's tired. He's been on his feet all day, running around doing stuff for them. He finally gets a chance to sit down and have something to eat. But as soon as he goes to drink the soup, he looks up and he sees Ginny staring at him, and that's awkward because they've broken up. And we find out that when Harry had told Hermione and Ron that he and Ginny broke up, he had offered to not be in the wedding party because of course Ginny's family and Ginny's gonna be there, and he didn't want to make it awkward for her. But Hermione and Ron's response was that, well, you're family too, so you're gonna be there. Like, she just has to deal with it, basically. So Harry doesn't bother drinking the soup, and he goes to talk to Dumbledore instead. And everybody is at this wedding. All of the Hogwarts staff, all of their past classmates, everybody is at this wedding. So he and Dumbledore gets to talking, and Dumbledore is mentioning how happy and great of an occasion this is, like finally a reason for celebration, and Harry's telling him not to jinx it. Like, let's make sure that they get to the honeymoon safely before we start saying that this was a win. And Harry is looking a bit glum, and Dumbledore picks up on this, and he kind of picks up that Harry is still upset about the whole Malfoy disappearing situation, so he tells Harry not to give up hope. He tells him that none of the seers have seen whether or not he'll come out of the Scholomance, so it's not all lost. And Harry reveals that he had once asked Neville to see Draco for him, and Neville had told him that it was this dark dungeon of a place with only one notebook and nobody else there. And Dumbledore tells him that he shouldn't feel awful because he didn't send Draco there. Despair sent him there. So they keep talking about some nonsense that's not necessary to the plot, and eventually Neville bursts in. But remember that Neville said that he wasn't gonna come to the party, so Neville burst in, and he's in a state. So they know that he is in the midst of a vision. So Harry and Dumbledore ask him, what is it? What is he seeing? And Neville says that he's seeing death, that blood rises against blood and the seed of evil has flowered. Beware, Dumbledore, you shall not leave this hall alive. The Dark Lord ascends tonight, and the greater darkness holds your only hope. And then he sways and he topples over in a faint. So they're trying to rouse him, they're trying to get him back to consciousness, and he only comes back to consciousness enough to tell them that they need to seek Mugwort and come free. And after he says that, so he's drawn a lot of attention. Hermione has come over, everybody's looking in their direction, but right after Neville says that, people start dropping like flies. Their face turns purple and they're just dropping like flies, and I'm telling you, everybody's dropping like flies. Ron's great uncles are the first to go, and then Professor McGonagall, and then Harry looks around and he sees Dumbledore turning purple, so he screams no. But Dumbledore collapses, and Harry's shaking him like, what am I supposed to do? What are we supposed to do? Guess what Dumbledore says? Have hope. This is your next great adventure. I mean, what? People are dropping like flies, dead, and the last thing he tells Harry is have hope. This is your next great adventure? People dying? En masse? Ugh. So anyway, Dumbledore dies, and Hermione does this spell to see what the cause is, and she finds out that the cause is poison. And they're wondering how in heaven's name anything got poisoned, because only their people who they know, are in attendance. And they have all sorts of spells guarding the place. So Hermione calls for Snape, and by the way, Snape is basically the leader of the resistance in this fanfic. Hermione calls for Snape because he's better at potions, of course, and Harry runs around casting cheering charms, I guess, to cheer everybody up. So Harry is running around casting cheering charms, and people just keep dropping like flies. Mr. and Mrs. Weasley, Percy, and eventually Hermione runs out of the kitchen and tells them that it's the soup, it's the soup that was poisoned, and that Snape is working on a potion to make everybody nauseous because that's supposed to help them until they can get the antidote. So Harry and Ron go to the kitchen to see what can be done, and they're arguing over the state of things and trying to get everybody sorted. And eventually Harry remembers that a part of the prophecy that Neville saw was to seek Mugwort and come free. And when he finally tells Snape is like, you idiot, those aren't people, those are herbs, that's the antidote. So they start arguing again over who is going to go out and fetch the antidote, and everybody wants to be the hero, everybody wants to go and get it. And eventually Fred and George pipe up and say, you know, we haven't told you guys before, but we are actually animagi, so they can turn into animals at will. So they train themselves to do that, and they can turn into weasels. And Snape, of course, is saying, well, that's fitting. So they win the argument as to who is gonna go out and get the herbs from Nocturne Alley. So they turn into weasels and they go and get it. And they're waiting around, and eventually two weasels come back, but one is dragging the other. So basically one weasel was injured, and it's George, and they force him to turn back into a human with magic, and they can see that he's injured pretty badly. And the twins tell everyone that they were basically ambushed, and Voldemort has the place surrounded or something of the sort, but they were injured, and eventually George dies. Oh, but also before that, Ginny was in the fray of voices who wanted to go out and get the herbs, but of course everybody put their foot down, especially Ron. He's like, "You're not going anywhere." And she's like, "Oh, so you think I'm incapable?" And he's saying that's not it. Like, they lost Percy, they lost their parents, they're not gonna lose you too. But of course she's taking it personally, like they don't think that she's good for anything. So they whip up the antidote and they go around giving it to people and counting all of their fatalities. And Professor Sprout, Madame Pomfrey, Madame Hooch, Lupin, Mundungus Fletcher, all of those people are gone. And they noticed that Voldemort was basically trying to take out all of the older people. But Hagrid survives because of his size, and he only drank a normal person's portion of soup. So anyway, they're running around giving out the antidotes, and eventually after they finish, they realize that they haven't seen Ginny in a while. Nobody can find Ginny. Hermione, Ron, and Harry are hatching a plan to go out and find Ginny, and Snape is telling them how dumb they are. Like, if she was silly enough to go out there when she knows that Voldemort is out there and get herself caught, then that's her business. But of course, the Golden Trio aren't trying to hear that. So Ron tells off Snape and tells him that it's because he's never loved anybody. He actually tells him that it's because he's never lost anybody, and Snape goes white in the face and he advances on Ron, saying, "Weasley, when every one of your remaining kin has been killed hideously, and you've watched Granger die a slow and painful death in front of you, knowing that you can't help her at all, well, then you will have lost as much as I've lost." But eventually the Golden Trio gets their way, and it's because Harry has hatched this plan that I still can't understand. His plan was basically to make it seem magically as if everybody is running out of the wedding venue all at once, and they're gonna somehow carry Dumbledore's body with them to make it seem real. But then I don't understand how it's a plan, because they actually do that. Like, everybody just runs out at once and they carry Dumbledore's body. I don't even know where they left Dumbledore's body, because the scene jumps forward after Harry says that this is his plan. The scene jumps forward and Harry, Hermione, and Ron are in a forest on the outskirts of the wedding venue, and they're in hiding, and Hermione casts this spell to find out where Ginny is, and whichever direction she turns in, if Ginny is in that direction, the wand will light up red. So she's turning, and she turns towards the wedding venue that they just escaped from, and the wand turns red. So after this grand escape that everybody made from the wedding venue, grand escape meaning everybody just running in different directions from the venue and them somehow transporting and then ditching Dumbledore's body, after all of that, they have to head back into the venue, I guess. So they're tiptoeing back into the venue that they just escaped from, and Ginny makes her grand reveal. So Ginny is up on stage, and it's revealed that Ginny has been working for Voldemort. Like, Voldemort has some kind of hold over her that had started with the Riddle Diary, but because she was feeling so down about the relationship with Harry and everybody was treating her so awful, like I don't know, she got weak enough for him to get control over her again somehow. And she is up there like, well. and they realize that it's the prophecy unfolding, because the prophecy had said blood will rise against blood or something like that. And she's revealing her grand plan, and she's saying, well, didn't you ever wonder how Voldemort was always one step ahead? And Ron is like, you told him you've been a spy? And she said, yeah, of course, and I poisoned the soup. And Ron is losing his mind like, what? Percy's dead, mom and dad are dead, you did all of that? And she's like, yeah. So Ron approaches her and she Avada Kedavra's Ron. So Hermione loses her mind and she sets the platform on fire with Ginny and Voldemort. Voldemort was there, by the way. Voldemort made an appearance behind Ginny, and I'm telling you how absolutely useless this Harry is, because there's Voldemort again with Harry in sight, and Voldemort just stands there, not trying to capture Harry, but just, I don't know, just allows Ginny to blab, and Hermione sets the entire place on fire, but Voldemort and his Death Eaters operates before they can be, cooked. So the scene jumps forward again, and before the Golden Trio had left to find Ginny, Snape had given them some kind of instructions on where to meet. They should meet in the underground train station. He's gonna send somebody to find them at a certain time. And so Harry and Hermione go there, and then now they're at the safe house and they're explaining everything that happened. And Snape is saying that he already has a plan in motion. He sent Sirius off to find the wolves to come to their side. He sent Hagrid off to find the giants to come to their side. And Harry's asking, so what do you want us to do? And Snape is saying, well, you can stay and fight if you decide to listen to me and like follow my instructions. And of course Hermione's down for anything, so she's like, yeah, just tell us what to do. And that's the end of that chapter. So chapter 5 is so short. It's like 530 something words, and it's so short. So it was basically some kind of internal monologue of Lucius Malfoy, basically revealing his grand plan. He was saying how he's so disappointed in Draco because when Lucius was at Hogwarts, they never lost the Quidditch Cup, and Draco has never shown any particular talent, and he's basically good for nothing. So his grand plan was to offer Draco as a sacrifice to Voldemort to secure the Malfoy's place within Voldemort's army. And in the event that fails and the other side comes out victorious, then that also means that Draco would have gone into the Scholomance and been successful, and he would be an icon or a ray of hope for the other side. So then the Malfoy's name would continue there also. So basically, if Voldemort wins and Draco dies, then Lucius is there to carry on the Malfoy name, and if Voldemort loses and Lucius dies, then Draco is there on the other side as a kind of beacon of hope to carry on the Malfoy name. And it doesn't make any sense, and it's full of holes, because how did Lucius know what the prophecy was? Draco hadn't told anybody. So how did Lucius know that this was the prophecy? And also, how did he know that Draco would get out of the Scholomance? Because the whole idea is that it's a thing that people don't usually come out of. So if Draco showed no particular talent, what would make him think that Draco would come out of the Scholomance in time to be of use to the other side? It makes no sense, but on we go. So the final chapter opens with this I don't know, like late 90s, early 2000s type scene where Harry is in a shopping mall disguised as a muggle, and he is trying to elude some Death Eaters. So he's wearing shades and Death Eaters are everywhere looking for him, and he's trying to dodge them and elude them. And it turns out that Colin has turned a traitor, and he basically gave Harry some false information that made Harry wind up in the shopping mall and is now eluding Death Eaters. So he finally does it, and he gets outside only for Lucius to do this advanced Crucio spell on him. I think it's called Crucio Extremio or something like that. And he does this advanced Crucio on him, and Lucius captures him and carries Harry to this kind of warehouse thing where he ties him up, and he gives him the truth potion, and he starts like interrogating him. And when I tell you that he had Harry there for hours, and this is how I know that this Harry is absolutely useless, because Lucius had him there interrogating him for hours, and Voldemort just doesn't show up. Harry isn't this pressing thing for Voldemort where Voldemort needs to find him now and destroy him now, because they're just there sitting talking and Voldemort doesn't show up. But eventually Draco shows up. So he's escaped the Scholomance, and he just shows up out of nowhere, and Lucius is stunned to silence. Like, how is he stunned to silence when this was his entire plan? Anyway, Draco puts his hand on Harry and whispers some kind of counter curse to the truth serum, and Harry eventually stops blabbing. And he gets up and he's like, oh my god, Draco. And he touches Draco's face and he touches Draco's hair, and that's how he realizes that Draco is real, because Draco is in a state. His hair is as long as his dad now, and the ends are blunt as if he hacked it off with a knife, and it's tied back. And Harry's touching his face and he's touching his hair and he's saying, wow, it's really you. And Malfoy hugs him and they have a moment for a bit. And Harry's saying, we need to go now, and we need to warn everybody about Colin. Draco is like, what are you talking about? So Harry realizes, like, how did you know I was here? And Draco says he didn't know he was here, which means that he basically came there for his father. So he tells Harry to sit down, that this isn't going to take long, and Harry's like, no, we need to go. So he imperviouses Harry, and Harry has to sit down. And then Draco advances on his father. And this is where we find out that his father apparently did something to his mother. Oh my god, right, I just remembered. It didn't start with Harry in the shopping mall. It actually started, this chapter started with a blue-eyed baby. And Lucius basically presented the baby to Voldemort, and Voldemort was not happy with the baby, but Voldemort couldn't tell Lucius why he wasn't happy with the baby, because even Lucius's loyalty would have probably broken if he knew the real reason why Voldemort wanted the baby was to use the baby as a replacement for Draco, but the baby's blood wasn't close enough to Draco's. He tells Lucius, when Lucius is asking, why aren't you happy, that Voldemort is sure that the baby will make a fine servant to him, and that Lucius should go and try to find Harry now, and that he wants Harry alive. Yeah. So, sorry about that. Jumping back to the present moment with Draco versus Lucius. We find out that Lucius did something to Draco's mother, but we don't really know what it was. And Draco basically just offs his dad. And then the scene jumps forward with Hermione wiping down Harry's face. So he passed out along the way somewhere. And he comes to, and he's like, Draco, where's Draco? And Hermione is like, Draco's fine. He's with Snape, getting settled. And he tells Hermione that Draco killed his dad. And Hermione's saying like, yeah, we know he told us, and he was almost daring us to say something about it, and Harry is defending Draco like, well, anybody would have done it, and Hermione's like, what are you talking about? He killed his dad, and he's dark. He's gone dark. So Snape comes in and they're arguing about Draco, and Snape and Harry is basically willing to use Draco in the war. But Hermione doesn't want to because Draco knows black magic now. Like, that's all he knows now, dark magic. Because he learned from the Scholomance and it's a school for dark magic. But Snape and Harry are willing to use him. So Snape tells Harry to go and find out like what Draco knows and how he can be useful. So Harry goes to Draco. He finds Draco in a room, sitting on the floor, staring at a beam of sunlight, and he's obviously lost in his own head. So Harry sits beside him and he is saying, I bet it's great to be out, and wistfully Draco says, am I out? And he reaches for Harry and he touches his face and he touches his mouth. And he's like, yeah, I'm out. Anyway, Harry goes to touch Draco and Draco jerks back and gets up and he's like, so I bet you guys want to use me now. And Harry's like, yeah, so, what can you do? And Draco conjures a desk and a table out of nowhere, which isn't that something that they could already do? I mean, he doesn't transfigure it, he literally just conjures it out of thin air and calls it air elemental. So, I don't know. And Harry's asking, like, can that help us in the war? Draco's saying no, it would be better if he summons demons, but Harry is a bit apprehensive about summoning demons. And Draco is saying he can raise the dead. And it would be best if he used dead people who they've seen die. So Harry doesn't look too good at this. And Draco's like, did I hit a nerve, Potter? Do you expect me to feel bad for you because you've watched a few people die? And Harry's like, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's not fair of me because you've been stuck in the Scholomance. Like, how is that equal? Harry has watched, like, basically everybody he knows die. Draco has been in the Scholomance, which is a really dark room, learning to conjure demons and all of that stuff. But Harry isn't allowed to feel bad because he's watched people die? Like, how is the Scholomance worse than that? But apparently, like, Harry apologizes for feeling bad about the people he's watched died. So apparently the Scholomance is worse. They argue and they bicker some more, and we find out that Draco doesn't really want to fight for them because he thinks that Dumbledore somehow set him up to go to the Scholomance. And yeah, I hear what you're saying. It doesn't make sense, and it's a strainer full of holes because Dumbledore didn't even know the prophecy. So how could Dumbledore have set him up to go to the Scholomance? It doesn't make any sense. But here we are. Harry gets mad. Harry says, forget it. The scene jumps forward to Voldemort, and Voldemort has Lucius's body examining it. And he's seeing all of the spells that were cast on it, and he's intrigued because now he's thinking maybe he shouldn't just kill Draco. Maybe he can learn something from him now because these spells are stuff that he doesn't even know. Anyway, he summons Ginny. Voldemort summons Ginny, and this is when we find out that Ginny has just given birth, and the baby that we saw in the beginning was Ginny and Lucius's baby. Oh my god. And that Voldemort basically compelled her to have the baby with Lucius, but before he handed her over to Lucius, he had taken her himself and watched her cry out in pleasure and gratitude beneath him, whose body couldn't give pleasure to any woman in partial command of her senses. And I just want to stick a pin and discuss with y'all, what the hell does that mean? Does that mean that he doesn't have the proper appendages? What does that mean? His body can give pleasure to no woman in partial command of her senses? I don't know. I don't know what's beneath Voldemort's robes. Maybe it's like a Ken Barbie doll. You know, the way Voldemort doesn't have a nose anymore? Like, maybe more things disappeared and he's just a Ken Barbie doll. Anyway, Bellatrix is alive. Bellatrix is here. This is when we find out that she's here, and Voldemort sends them to London to get ready for battle. The scene jumps forward again to this scene where Harry and Hannah and Hermione, somebody else, I can't remember who, are staking out a museum. So we're back to that early 2000 trope of like museum heist. And they wait until the security guard leaves, and then they sneak in to get this Lycurgus cup. And this is the first time we're hearing about this cup, and we don't know why they want the cup, but they want the cup. It's in the museum, so they're going to get it. Harry is issuing orders like, Hannah, you go watch that door. Somebody else, you go watch that door. I'll watch this door, and Hermione will switch the cups. And before he even gets to his door, he smells something, and he's like, oh my god, trolls! So Hermione drops the cup, and Hannah, they kill Hannah, because everybody's dying in this. So they kill Hannah, and they eventually get away with this cup that nobody knew they wanted. So they're back in their hidey hole, and Harry must have done his rounds, so he is going to join Hermione and Snape in the planning room, and they have this desk that's a map or something like that, and they're drawing up battle lines like real Game of Thrones, like, I guess. And they're drawing up battle lines, and they're asking Harry if he had spoken to Draco and if Draco's gonna help them fight, and Harry's saying no because Draco kind of thinks that Dumbledore set him up. And they're having the old argument again where Hermione's saying we can't have someone there calling up demons, and everyone else is saying, well, we can't ask him not to defend himself, and if that's how he knows to defend himself, then we can't ask him not to do it. And it somehow turns out that Draco was in the room in the shadows all along listening, and they exchange words, and Draco eventually promises Snape. He gives him his word that he's gonna fight on their side. And then he stalks out, and Harry's like, do y'all need me here anymore? And Snape is like, no, go and get some rest. Like, he literally did nothing. He ain't did nothing. But they were like, no, we don't need you anymore. Go and get some rest. But Harry doesn't go to get any rest. He goes to Draco's room. And they're talking about something or another. Draco is saying how he blames everybody for him getting to the Scholomance, and he also blames himself, and he's talking about how horrible it was, and the conversation turns to whether or not they'll be able to beat Voldemort, and Draco is saying it's not really likely because he's so strong and he's so powerful, yada yada yada. And Harry's saying, well, he's only fighting with hate, like, we have stuff to live for, so we're gonna beat him. And then this moment passes between them, and Draco makes the first move, and he grabs Harry by his coat or his shirt or whatever, and he smooches him. And Harry means to pull back, but he doesn't. And he deepens it, and they're just mwah, 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 making out. And then eventually Draco pulls away and he tells him to go and get some rest. And Harry goes back to his room and he's thinking on Draco and he's reminiscing on other stuff and he can't sleep. And this is when we find out that he and Hermione had done stuff like intimate stuff. So basically they explain it like everybody was expecting them to get together, but they know that they're just friends. But I guess at one low point after they had lost someone else, I don't remember if it's Parvati or something, they had actually hooked up, and he was so worried that she would have hated him afterwards, but they just wound up laughing about it. And eventually Harry falls asleep, but it's a restless sleep and he is twisting and turning, and eventually he gets up and he just throws off the bed sheet, the blanket, and he goes to Malfoy's room, and Malfoy wakes up and he just attacks Malfoy, and Malfoy is like, well, you don't have to be a barbarian about it. And suffice to say, if you're interested in reading this book just for the explicit parts, don't, because we don't get a lot of descriptions, we don't get a lot of anything. It's written the way the rest of the book is written, as some kind of jumbled together, joined together summary of something that you're somehow supposed to be able to track. That's the way it's written. So if you're in it for the wow wow, don't. Anyway, so they do that, they fall asleep. Harry wakes up in Draco's bed. Draco's getting dressed. He's looking real pretty, and he summons a kind of robe for Harry, and Harry's like, wow, that's so impressive. Did you summon that out of thin air? And Draco's like, no, I got it from the Malfoy closet because I guess I'm the owner of the house now. Whatever. So the scene jumps forward and they're on this battlefield, and it's set up like one of those movies where you have like kingdoms fighting against kingdoms and they meet on this plane where they're separated and they'll like run towards each other. It's literally something like that. So Draco goes off with Hermione and Snape to stand on some kind of hill and cast protective spells at the foot soldiers who are going to run towards Snape. But before that, he touches Harry's chin and they have a kind of moment, and then the war is on and they're like running towards each other and casting spells and all of that stuff, and it goes on for a while, and there's a lull and then it starts again, and there's a lull and then it starts again, and it's getting to nighttime, so they know that Voldemort is going to send out the vampires, and he tells Fred to tell everybody to cast some kind of charm, some kind of spells to make sure that they can see in the darkness also. And then he goes back into the fray. Sirius is still alive. Hagrid is still alive. And while fighting, he hears a voice in his head. And it's not just him alone, it's like everybody. And the voice says, give me your dead, give me your dead. And then all around, the people they've seen die just start rising up and coming back, and Ron is back, and George is back, and everybody's back and fighting. And then eventually Dumbledore comes back also, and he tells Harry that eventually they're gonna have to let them go, because the longer they stay is the more they'll take with them when they leave. And Harry looks around and sees that the dead are like leeching color from the living. So Harry tells everybody that they have to send their dead back, so they have to say bye to their dead, and everybody sends their dead back. And Hermione and Ron have a kind of moment where he hugs her and he tells them to save Ginny, and then the dead disappears. And it gets kind of confusing, even more confusing from here on out, so I'm gonna try my best. Okay, so for some reason, they need to take the hill that Voldemort is on. I'm telling you, this is like that kind of type of show where they're on horsebacks and they have swords and they're charging each other. It's that kind of feel. But except they have wands. Anyway, they have an argument about what saving Ginny means, because Hermione kind of wants to kill Ginny, and she's like, well, that would be saving her, but Harry doesn't want that. Anyway, they have to take the hill, and they charge, but they can't get past Voldemort's shield, and they realize that any spell that they cast at Voldemort will be reflected on them. And Ginny's there. Ginny is up front, and she is just standing in all her evil era glory. And eventually they form like some kind of smaller team and try to infiltrate Voldemort's camp. And somehow, I don't know how, the scene just changes, and somehow they're in front of Voldemort. And before they got in front of Voldemort, when they're planning the smaller team that should infiltrate Voldemort, Fred and George comes over and they're like, we'll go with you. And that's when they realize that Fred didn't send back George, so George is there, and they realize that George is like leeching a whole lot of life from Fred, because Fred looks less human and George is looking more human. And they're saying, oh, like, you should have sent him back. And Fred is like, it was horrible here without him, so I'm not gonna send him back, and I'm gonna go with him. But we're gonna give them one last flash boom or whatever, and they hop upon their brooms and they start flying overhead, doing something. I don't know if they're setting off fireworks. I don't know what they're doing, but that happens anyway. And then the smaller group infiltrates Voldemort's camp, and somehow they get in front of Dumbledore at Voldemort, and Voldemort gets a hold of them. Voldemort gets a hold of everybody, and he puts this kind of spell on them to make them not move and not talk. And he gets a hold of Draco, and he gets a hold of his knife that he should use to finish the rite. And he puts it to Draco, and he's starting to cut Draco. And this is why I'm telling you that Harry serves no purpose. Because why is he trying to get to Draco so much when Harry's there, and Harry is supposed to be the key to everything? I don't know, but he wants Draco. So he moves the knife to cut Draco. And he does cut Draco, but Harry shouts out, Expelliarmus! And the knife flies in the air, and it lands on the ground. And Voldemort looks at the blood, and the blood doesn't look right. So he is like, impure? You're impure, but you just got out of the Scholomance yesterday. How are you impure? Oh, you sneaky little bastard. How did you manage to lose your virginity in one night? Did Hermione help you with that? And then he realizes that it's Potter who helped him to lose his virginity, and we are just confronted with just how many holes are in this calendar of a fanfic. Because rewind and remember that Draco was trying to jump off a cliff because he's marked, and Voldemort's gonna catch him, and it's either he kills himself or Voldemort kills him and there's no way out, blah 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 blah, and Dumbledore is losing his mind because, oh, there really is no way out, blah 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 blah. But then you realize that there was an option out. Like the spell wouldn't work if he's a virgin, so all he had to do was not be a virgin anymore, and that would have solved everything, apparently. Oh my god, I don't know. He willfully went into the Scholomance. And he's blaming everybody and saying, oh, Dumbledore set him up and this was his only way, when he could have just stopped being a virgin. And that would have solved everything. But anyway, Voldemort does a kind of spell to remove the markings that he'd already made on Draco. So he's basically undoing Draco as his sacrifice. And then Voldemort tells Ginny to bring the baby. And this is another just of the story, because they're no longer on the battlefield, but you would never know because the writer doesn't tell you, but they're in some sort of place now that has an altar for people to be sacrificed on. So we aren't on the battlefield anymore. I don't know when we left it. So Voldemort gets a hold of the child and he's about to put the markings on the child. And Harry shouts out a curse at him that misses him completely. And Voldemort is laughing like, oh, you missed me. And then he realizes that there's a knife sticking out of his chest and there's blood coming out of his mouth. And we find out that Ginny stabbed him. Somehow Ginny got a hold of her mind again and she kills Voldemort with a knife. The knife of Arsharti. So I thought that he was invincible. Like, they're playing it up like, oh, we can't kill him. It's so slim of a chance. But they kill him with a knife. And we fast forward to Malfoy Manor. So the war is over. They've won. And everybody's at Malfoy Manor. And they recuperate, they rest, and little by little everybody gets back to good health. And Hermione flies off to Hogwarts. I guess she's gonna take over Hogwarts. And we're flash forward to this scene where Ginny is leaving the manor and Harry's saying, are you sure about this? And she's saying, yeah, I'm sure, I just can't really look at him. And we don't know what they're talking about as yet. But Harry says, okay, call anytime. And she doesn't really look like she's gonna call. And then she leaves. And Draco comes up and Draco says, are you always like this? Are you always ridiculously inconveniencing yourself to compensate for irrational guilt? What the devil are you going to do with that thing? And by that thing, we realize they're talking about the baby. And Harry says, not me, we. And Draco says, I refuse to be involved with this lunacy. And Harry says, well, it's your brother. Draco says it's his half-brother and it's not even the better half. Draco is saying that the baby was conceived for the purpose of a sacrifice between a Death Eater and a thralled victim. And like, how is that going to impact the baby's early childhood development? And Harry's saying, well, we're just going to have to compensate for it. We'll buy him a firebolt. And that's the end of that. So that was Scholomance. I don't know. How do you feel about it? You guys let me know in the comments section. But right now, I'm going to rate this fanfic using the owls. grading scheme. So, in case you've forgotten, in case it's been a while since you've sat your owls, O is for outstanding, E for exceeds expectations, A for acceptable, P for poor, D for dreadful, and T for troll. So readability. The readability of this fanfic was just terrible. As far as the best and most readable part was that chapter 3, was it, that I was telling you about, that was just beautifully written, but everything else and everywhere else, and the worst part is that chapter 3 was short, so it's just a small part of the entire thing that was actually readable and digestible and understandable. So for readability, we're gonna give it a T. T for troll. Immersion. I was never immersed. I was never immersed in this fanfic. I kept questioning my life choices. Like, why am I doing this to myself? And do I really want to read every Draco, every Darry fanfic? Like, is that really what I want? For immersion, it's a T. T for troll. Character depth. These characters have no depth. There's nothing there. There's no depth. T. T. Plot intricacy. Now, this is one thing that we can say that this fanfic has. In fact, it may even be too intricate. All of the different cliches just clobbered together in a hive of confusion. It's an O for outstanding because it's outstandingly intricate, maybe to its detriment, but it is intricate. Now, as for originality, well, this is the first time I've ever heard of the Scholomance. I don't know if it's something that is a folktale, a mythological thing that just exists, but it seems really interesting to me, this idea that there's this school that you get locked in that nobody can get to, and you have to learn enough to conquer the demons at each door in order to get out. That's really interesting to me. So we'll give that one an A for acceptable. And last but not least, the message. I don't know what the message was supposed to be. I don't know if fanfics need a message, but if there was a message here, I don't know what it was. Maybe you know, leave it in the comment section, but that's a T for troll. So out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we only have 2 out of 6 owls. Join us next time.